It's time for Type 40, your Doctor Who podcast from the Spacebook for the Fandom Podcast Network. I'm Dan Hadley, Birmingham's king of the geeks, and once again, your designated driver. Now, it could be you're new to the show. Hold tight, mind the giant wasps this time, but it's just as likely you've been aboard before. Well, whichever, you'll be safe in the knowledge this is the free-speaking, big-thinking, eclectic and eccentric show for everyone, whatever decade or century you started watching, reading or listening along to those timeless adventures of our hero, Doctor Who. We chat about it all on this show. All views are encouraged, and there could even be a few laughs along the way. Chin chin. So come and step into our TARDIS and share this journey together here with us on Type 40. Yes, where am I? There I am. Yes, we're back with another one of these Type 40 Club shows. So it's our casual book club style meetups with friends and fellow fans, reviewing randomised episodes of our favourite show, concentrating on the 21st century incarnation of Doctor Who, at least for now. Recorded live in front of an audience on Facebook and YouTube, the world's largest streaming platform, and all our friends over there in the Type 40 Facebook group and on the Facebook page. Hello, everybody out there. And I'm sat here basking in the glow. I've just rewatched this episode after years. Can't wait to get talking about it. I have got a drink to hand, almost to hand, and it's it's quite a mild night out there, but it's been very stormy of late. In the chair by the fireside, though, there's a man who knows how it's done. It's the screenwriter, the filmmaker, and director, Mr. Ian David Diaz. Welcome back, Ian.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you? You all right?
No trouble, mate. Yeah, I'm good.
Yes.
I'm good. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm fine, and looking forward to talking about this one.
Getting stuck in, yeah. Because you were with me when we hit the randomizer.
Yes.
And it worked its magic, did it? And it spat this episode out at us. So when you first saw that title, The Unicorn and the Wasp, did you immediately know which episode it was? Or did you have to really think, have I seen that one?
No, I remember it. I remember the episode. Yeah.
Excellent news. Well, because I think that when it comes to, even with you, Doctor Who, come to think of it, there's been so much of it. You'd be forgiven for getting some episodes kind of mixed up with one another, but I do think this one is unmistakable. But we're bound to let a few things drop. So, fortunately for us, the Department of Wendology has deployed their CEO to keep us in check. So, welcome back, Wendy.
Hello. Nice to be back, Dan.
All present and correct.
Yes, all present and correct. I've just finished watching this episode. Yes.
So you're fresh then. You're fresh from that car chase at the end. The world's shortest and slowest car chase ever. But forget about all that. We're going to be hold tight anyway. Yeah, getting to the spirit of it anyway. And last but no least. Time again. Last but by no means least, we have fresh from nearly 6 weeks of concentrated reviews of Doctor Who Flux with me here on the podcast. It was only right we invited back to talk about some good stuff, wasn't it? Welcome back, Charlotte Shields.
I know, it's to prove I do actually like the show. I don't just moan about it.
Charlotte Steels. Yeah.
Yes, you were my longest suffering cohort on those shows, but we made it through together, didn't we?
Yeah, I became your little companion, didn't I? In a way.
Rather you than me.
Yeah. Ian, you didn't watch any of it, did you?
Nope. I watched Doctor Who. I don't watch.
That's a really good answer. Mm-hmm. So this is our friendly and open review strand, everybody, going forwards into this gap year and a half maybe on Type 40 with no regular series of Doctor Who on screen anytime soon. It's going to take a while to wash all of that down anyway, isn't it, Charlotte? Let's be honest. We're going to be taking a regular randomised look back at Doctor Who stories that us or you may not have experienced for quite some time. If you know them inside out, then fair enough. We know lots of you do, but I certainly don't. This is as much a social thing as anything else for all us to to take in really some of the Doctor Who universe, some of the sights and sounds over the last 2 decades, and not just a palate cleanser, but time to sort of sit back and smell some of the roses, because the beauty of being in this old girl is that we can keep going backwards in time to when things were great and Doctor Who was the biggest show on TV. We are streaming this live to YouTube and Facebook, as I said earlier on, to gather our companions' memories too, nitpicks, favourite moments, the things you don't like about this story. There may be a few things. We'll wait and see. But I think when it comes to Doctor Who, and I think particularly when Doctor Who has traversed into other genres and they've either met historical characters that we may know something about, or indeed writers where we've read large amounts of their work, where some of us out there all go, oh, that's not right, or they didn't do that then, or they didn't write that until after that. There's always a swatting class, isn't there, Wendy? But I think generally, generally the spirit of togetherness and adventure does sort of rise above all of that. So yeah, let us know your comments, your memories, keep them coming, and we'll be interacting with you at various points throughout the show. Now, we are all too aware too that these reviews are far from the first word on these adventures, and they aren't intended to be the definitive or last word either, just the latest word as we reconnect with our feelings and our memories and share them amongst one another and out there with our friends and fellow travelling companions just like you. That's all the housekeeping out of the way. Almost. Now, before we get into the episode itself, though, I have to remind you that if you'd like to do some real-time travelling of your own, each and every edition of this show, past, present, and future, is just a tap or two away. If you know where to look, and on the device of your choice, there's dozens of great conversations, reviews, previews, interviews, geek outs, and deep dives with all our regular voices and faces. We know there's something for every fan at type40.podbean.com. There'll be more about all of that a little later on, as well as a couple of minutes where we make contact with that matrix of all knowledge that we call the Fandom Podcast Network for a word about all the other cool conversations going on all their other shows over there. I'm pretty sure that is everything. And yeah, the time rotor is stopping spinning now, and we are. Yeah, have you got your psychic paper to hand, Charlotte?
I've got a pad. Does that work?
That'll do. That'll more than do. Let's get stuck in.
You got me Oyster card.
As long as
that
we can
work?
flash it, I'm sure they'll let us in. Let's be honest. We're going to be crashing what is the world's tiniest garden party, aren't we? But let's go. Let's go. Okay, yeah, Doctor Who was the toast of TV back in 2008, wasn't it, Ian? Do you remember it?
Yeah, I remember it. I remember the advert for when the BBC played it, and you saw that big wasp thing. That's how I remember this episode through the advert, because you can never forget that when you watched it. I was like, oh, there's a wasp in Doctor Who. Got to watch that kind of thing. So yeah. That's
everything about the show over those 3 years in between it becomes sort of iconic, hadn't it? The sets, the characters, the recurring characters, the theme tune. It become a Saturday evening ritual by 2008, I think.
Yeah, and that awful. I hate that. Oh, that TARDIS room is so crap.
You still don't do the coral?
No, it's just rubbish. Come on, let's face it.
I don't know. I sort of waver on it a little bit, but I think that the important thing is that these icons, Charlotte, they did manage to connect, didn't they, with the general audience? People like yourself who'd only been watching a couple of years. You'd seen this show come almost out of nowhere. I think your dad had sort of told you about Doctor Who, hadn't he? And then it comes into the schedules, comes back to the schedules, and trounces things like Ant and Dec. And the celebrity wrestling. Do you remember celebrity wrestling? If you don't believe me, go and Google that. And David Tennant he'd become the best known face on British TV, hadn't he?
Yeah. I think Series 4, which is what this episode is part of, it really felt like Doctor Who couldn't be touched. It just felt like everything was trying to either catch up, or it was just leaving stuff in its wake. And see, the coral stuff, I can understand why some people don't like it, but I can just remember. I think
like the console.
Really. See, I get what you mean with the console, but I think the general room did a really good job at just feeling massive. And I remember that's what I just felt first watching it. It just felt like this absolutely massive space, and it sort of helped to sort of make you understand the big on the inside stuff a bit more, because you could visually see it. So I think they did a good job on that aspect of it.
Communicating the fact that it was like a world within a world that was slightly removed from our own, where I wouldn't say different laws applied, but it was the Doctor's domain. And
it was alien. It was definitely an alien feel to it.
Yeah. This particular episode came along as episode 7 of series 4. Now, we didn't know at the time, I think, that this was going to be David Tennant's final season in the title role. I think they kept it under wraps for a little longer, Wendy. Do you remember when it was that came about?
Do you know, I can't really remember when we first found that out and where it was actually announced, or where
I can remember where.
I remember it being broadcast.
I can remember where. It was the National Television Awards. Basically, Tennant wasn't there, and he did a video because he was doing Hamlet at the time. So he literally was outside like the theatre, and he just announced it, like, I'm leaving Doctor Who. And I can remember just thinking that's also plays to what we were saying, that at a National Television Awards, that's how he announced he was going. It wasn't like a press release. It wasn't like a little thing. It was big. And I can remember the reaction to the announcement. It was like, oh God, what we're going to do? Like, the king's gone, almost sort of mentality.
And we got Matt.
But I can't remember which time of year that event was shown at, whether it was later in the year or whether it had been on by now, if you follow me.
I can't remember. I just remember where.
It was towards September, wasn't it? Towards September.
Later.
Odd, it was such an odd place for him to announce it. That's all I can remember when he did.
Oh, well done, Charlotte. Yeah, I couldn't remember that.
I can't remember it either, but then again, I'm old, so.
I hear you.
They broke it to us as gently as they could, and I suppose at a point where, in between his acts of the play, people couldn't grab him and demand that he tells us more, because he was due back on stage. He got his job to do, so it was very, very clever, that of David Tennant. But he was probably the best known face, and certainly the best known quiff on British TV back then. This was entering into the second half of his final full season as the Doctor. And if you haven't seen it for a while, here's a quick refresher about the Unicorn and the Wasp. It was broadcast on Saturday, the 17th of May, 2008, on BBC One originally. And it was all the way back in 1926. Agatha Christie mysteriously disappears, only to be found 10 days later at Harrogate Hotel with no memory of what happened to her. What could have been the cause? Was it a nervous breakdown? Was it a cry for help? Or did it involve a giant alien wasp and a mysterious stranger known as the Doctor? That's how the Radio Times teased it. Yeah. So as much as Doctor Who is, I would say that its stock trade isn't real history. It's COD history. It's offering us history in a condensed way. And whether it's historical events or historical characters, there's only so much that it can tell within a either 25-minute or 45-minute screenplay, isn't there, Ian? There's a lot in this episode too. Yeah,
there's a lot of stuff I didn't like as well, but that's just me, right? As I keep saying, I'm a fan, but the Doctor Who's not above criticism. I enjoyed it. It was fun, but watching it again, I cringe watching it this time round. When I first saw it, I thought, it was a lot of fun, but now watching, I think,
really?
Because episode.
But I've always maintained that Doctor Who needs to grow up. The scripts need to be solidified, need to be in a logic that you can't break.
This is very mature, though, isn't it, Ian? This story, for all that it's got a zany and fast quality.
It's funny in places, but it's just the idea of a guy going. Zzz. I just thought, oh no, please, why do you get this in Star Trek? Do you get this in? You don't get this only in British silly TV. You get this a guy going. Zzz. I'm like, what the? You know what I mean? So even when I
what you're
first saw
talking about, Ian, is high fantasy rather than
yeah,
hard
no,
science
come
fiction.
on, it's just beyond cheesy. That's just stupid. Why would he go? Zzz? Why would he do that? Because he's
But
a
he
bee.
did.
You know what I mean?
He
It's just
did.
like
So
ridiculous.
as all when Ian's on the show, we're going right to the end of the story because you're talking about the character.
No, I'm just talking about one aspect of
No, but you're talking about the character when it's revealed,
I
isn't
didn't
it? The
give anything
nature of,
away. I didn't give anything away.
when the nature of the menace of the Vespa form is sort of
All right.
confirmed, and we see this transformation, don't we,
Yeah.
between human form and Vespa form, this giant wasp. That was always going to be a hard sell, wasn't it, Charlotte? Whenever they do this on Doctor Who, whether it's classic or New Who, whether it's a giant snake or a giant rat, it's always the hardest thing to sell people on. And in realistically, to give Ian his due, I'm teasing him a little there. It's quite right, though, isn't it, that people latch onto those elements of it because they kind of define something like this.
Well, yeah, and it's especially when you do a very animalistic alien. And that was another trait of Russell's era. He liked to do stuff that you'd recognise as whether it's a cat, if it was the nurses,
Giant
the
crabs.
Jadoon were rhinos. Like, you can see that was his trait, so it does make sense. See, I think, though, and I think we're missing some of that. I think some of the really Britishness is the silliness at times. I'm not saying the whole script should be silly, because then it would just be a farce, but I just
That's what
think...
it was.
No, but I agree
Yeah,
with Dan. I think there's... the bits that are Agatha Christie, though, I think they're done quite well. And they're done with actually quite a bit of a serious sort of realistic turn.
I have a lot of friends that actually sort of like went away from Doctor Who because of this silliness. As I said, as I keep maintaining, Doctor Who scripts need to grow up, and if they carry on with this kind of tone in the new version, I'm just going to have my hands in my head all the time. But as I said with this, as I said, I enjoyed it the first time round, but the second time round, I'm watching it, I'm thinking, oh no, please. But you know, that's just me, right?
I mean, what we're talking about there is the tone. This was the fourth time in 4 series that they'd stuck to the same blueprint, hadn't they? Russell T Davies had, and it really, why, if something's not broke, why fix it? So we had Charles Dickens in series 1, followed by Queen Victoria, William Shakespeare, and then Agatha Christie in this episode. Again, I think Gareth Roberts also wrote the Shakespeare Code. Yes, they got him back for this one. But again, I think it tonally, it's similar, but not exactly the same. This is much, much zanier, and it's very clear. Whereas there's been so many cinematic interpretations of Shakespeare, not just his work, but him as a person over the years. Somebody like Agatha Christie is really shrouded in mystery, aren't they, Wendy? For somebody who wrote so many books, not really that long ago, only in the last century, she's still shrouded in mystery. We see very few pictures of her. And so for them to bring her into contact with the Doctor and Donna, I remember hearing about it and thinking, oh, wow, that's going to be so much fun. And Fenella Woolgar, who plays her in this, I think
she's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, she is. And I was just thinking, as you were speaking about it earlier, that this is a lovely, in my opinion, this is a lovely treatment and a lovely way to imagine her. And I think it was done very, very kindly and with great respect for her as a writer, but also the way that her character is written and portrayed is lovely. And I was very impressed by that. I was very concerned, as I would be with any sort of recreation of a well-known individual from history, whether they be a writer or whoever. It's always very concerning because you think we all have a mental image of what we think certain people were like and what we think that, and we may already, there may be a lot of information out there on that person. So you're even more critical. Whereas, as you say, there wasn't as much, I suppose, out there on Agatha Christie. So we were able to, I think, accept this version of her maybe, or at least I was, a lot more easily.
Well cast.
And I think so, yeah. She was marvelous. She
plays it with a lightness of touch. And I think although the writer and the showrunner both have fun with this, because as I understand, with each draft of the script, they kept challenging one another to make it funnier, make it snappier, and to include more references to her work in there. And they poke fun at the genre too, at its conventions, but it remains respectful and so affectionate towards this woman, allowing Woolgar to really bring the character to life in a downplayed way.
Yes, absolutely. And I love the way she played her as well. As you said, a downplayed way, but in a way that allowed her to shine as an intelligent woman and as an intelligent person. And even the way the Doctor interacts with her, he encourages her, and Donna the same, you know, and he says to her, you know, you're Agatha Christie. This is your game. You know, you can figure this out. And he sort of brings her back out of that funk that she's sort of gotten herself into, and she's feeling very, you know, downtrodden and as if her work isn't going to be remembered. And of course, as I'm listening to the dialogue, I'm thinking, oh my God, it reminds me a little bit of the Matt episode with Van Gogh, you know, where they allow him a little glimpse to see, and in Van Gogh's case, a very big glimpse at what his legacy is going to be like. And
this is a less saccharine version of the same kind of thing.
There's 3 times they did it. They did it with what's that one with Chris Eccleston? It wasn't Shakespeare.
Charlie.
It was and they mentioned this in this.
Charles Dickens.
They mentioned that in this as well, and they did it with her, and they did it with Van Gogh, So
what I like about the Christie, the way they treat Christie in this, though, is that, as you said, Wendy, at this point in her life, she is at a crossroads in her life. She's in her personal life at a crisis in her career, whereby she's successful, a published author. Early in her career, her books are bought, read, and clearly loved, because that's why she'd been invited to this party. But she's still at crisis nonetheless. But it's not written. She's not written as a weak character at all. She's written as a human character. And I think that nowadays, 14 years on, we don't see many characters, particularly women, written this confidently and with this much reality, Charlotte. I mean, it was like a breath of fresh air for me, this.
Oh no, because they made her doubtful of herself. I think that was the key. But she didn't feel any less empowered because of it, though. I know that's the thing, that they obviously had her show her strengths, her cleverness, her sort of ingenuity. But then they did say, at the end of the day, she's a human, and humans have doubts. And we all have moments when we think, is it really worth it? That's what I got from that scene with Donna. But Gareth did this with Shakespeare. And that's why I quite like Shakespeare Code, because of how Shakespeare's written in that episode. Because they touch upon in that episode his mental health issues. And it's very cleverly done in that episode, and it's a lightness to it, but it's there. And obviously with Shakespeare, he'd lost his child. So it's talking about very serious issue. And with here, it's about her husband infidelity and the husband cheating. So they're very real, normal day occurrences. And they just give these characters these very humanizing things. And it just makes you care about them more. Like I said, I think Gareth wrote both Shakespeare Code and this, and I can see a sort of similar, in some ways, respect towards both historical characters he wrote in those episodes.
I do feel that he sort of puts himself as well, Ian, almost in the form of Donna there, because she's the one who's geeking out. Actually, no, the Doctor is too, because the Doctor had mentioned before in the series, I can't remember which episode, that he would love to meet Christie if he gets a chance to, but it's Donna that's kind of all over her, isn't it? And it's hard not to completely fall for those moments and be right there with Donna. And Catherine Tate plays her so well.
I love when she does the copyright thing. Let's copyright that.
They do that gag 3 times, and it's funny every single time.
Yep.
But she's funny though. That's the thing. She's obviously she's a comedian, and she brings life to Donna. Actually, when I first saw her, I really didn't like her at all. I thought she was unlikable. But in this season, she becomes her own person, in my opinion. As I said, when I saw her in the Bride one, the Christmas special, I just thought, why? Do you know what I mean? Thank God she's not going with him. And then when she came back with those little squishy things, I just thought, oh no, why are they doing this? And I didn't really
I
like
was
her,
the
but
same.
yeah, I think in this season, she really did, especially at the library episode, and she was like, she's become her own character and stuff like that. She's a bit overbearing at times, but
Well,
you
think
know,
about where
sometimes,
Mother is.
yeah, well, sometimes the doctor has to stop her. Do you know what I mean? But the doctor's very respectful. He's respectful to Agatha Christie in this episode as well. You know, when I think she tells him off at one point, and he just allows it. Do you know what I mean? So he's very respectful of all the characters in this episode, which is quite good because Tennant always overacts as the Doctor, which I guess that was his trade.
Overacts, but I
think he does.
Energetic actor.
I think he does.
And he can sometimes lay on a touch thick.
No, very thick in this episode. Very, very thick. But he was enjoyable. He was enjoyable, wasn't he?
I made a joke earlier on about this being the world's tiniest garden party, but there's a great cast nonetheless. Fleshing it out. So we have Lady Edison played by the legendary Felicity Kendall from The Good Life and Solo. And what was that? Rosemary in Time, that silly detective show with her and Pam Ferris. That was great. And we've mentioned Fenella Woolgar as Agatha Christie. There's Tom Goodman Hill there, who's been seen in lots of shows since, things like Mr. Selfridge. He plays the Reverend Arnold Golightly. Ian Barrett plays Professor Peach. It's got to be one of my favourite character names in Doctor Who history ever. We've got Adam Rayner plays Roger. Daniel King plays Davenport. Charlotte Eaton plays Mrs. Hart. There's a name straight out of Cluedo as well. We've got Lena Dingra as Miss Chandrakala. I knew I'd struggle with that. And the awesome Felicity Jones, who's now a major Hollywood star.
That's right,
as the kind of villain of the piece, I suppose. Yes, she went on to be in Star Wars, most notably in Geek Culture in Rogue One, as probably the lead characters, so as you said there, Ian. She's also been in The Theory of Everything, didn't she?
That was a great film.
The biopic of what's his name, Stephen Hawking.
Yep. I really like that film.
Lots of great drama films and comedy films. You never really know what she's going to turn up in next. But here she is in this, again, just one of many people in the cast. And a cast, it's a strong cast. It's not, she's great in it, but then I think everybody's great in this. And joined, I think it's only fair that we highlight too, that they're joined by Doctor Who recurring character royalty in the form of Christopher Benjamin. Originally seen playing Sir Keith Gold back in 1970 in Inferno, and then as Henry Gordon Jago in The Talons of Wayne Chiang. We see him again in this, again as Colonel Hugh Kirbishley, the husband of... And
he hasn't changed.
Character.
He's a marvellous character. He really is. Yeah,
he seems to have changed, does he?
No, exactly. He does. He's very recognisable, and he's such a wonderful character. It was just such a pleasure to see him in this again, and I'd forgotten that he was in this one. So it was a delight to see him. We were going, there he is, Jacob.
But as is traditional with these stories, Ian, they're whodunits, aren't they? And they've all got their conventions, and one by one, the characters are going to get bumped off one by one as the list of suspects of the culprit gets whittled down. Are you a fan of that kind of storytelling, or is it something that makes you yawn a little? All that French windows, tea on the lawn stuff.
No, as I said, it kind of reminds me of Cluedo. This episode, the movie Cluedo. I don't know if you ever saw it. A lot of people have forgotten.
I know of it. Yeah,
I really like that movie. But it kind of reminds me of that. But as I said, right, if I had a criticism on this episode, it was how very childish the screenplay was, and that's my only criticism of it. But I did, when I first saw it, I did enjoy it, and I rarely see stuff that's set in that time, especially the stuff that BBC make. I despise that stuff with the frocks and all that nonsense. I can't really get into that nonsense at all. But it's Doctor Who. You got to watch it, right? You got to watch it because it's
drama isn't really your thing, is it?
No, it's not at all.
It is a big thing in America, though, and I thought it was interesting that this episode was done in the way that it was, because I do wonder if that was part of the reason that they did it, because it is something that's quite relatable really all over the world, but particularly in a big market like America. We love that stuff. We just do.
Yeah, I know.
So British.
Very British.
Downton Abbey. The success of Downton Abbey is
Yeah.
largely down to its international audience. Masterpiece Theatre, I think, shows it there, and this is very, very Downton, albeit on a budget. It looks like the costumery was maybe from somewhere like Primark or somewhere like that, rather than anywhere lavish.
BBC costumes,
but it's still in the same world, yeah.
But it was enough to set the tone, and there was so much going on that you didn't really have that much time to be too concerned, thankfully, or focus too much on things. But it sort of accomplished the goal of setting the scene, I think.
The thing that really bothered me in the script, and as I said, I don't say these things lightly because I am a huge Doctor Who fan, but as I said, I'm a huge fan of a lot of genres, and I don't give them free passes because I'm a huge fan. It's just the idea that Agatha Christie will not accept that thing is an alien. It's just the logic behind that. I just go, why? If you saw a huge wasp floating in front of you, of course you're going to believe it exists. Of course you're going to listen to the Doctor, what he's saying. If you knew about it, you wouldn't just go, oh, poppycock. That's all done with mirrors. Of course you wouldn't say that, would you? Logic. That is what's wrong with this script. You see, that's
as soon as she sees it, though, you see a completely different change in attitude.
No, you didn't. Because remember, the first time she saw it, she says, "Oh, it's done with mirrors and stuff." And then even after she's seen it again, she still denied it. Don't you remember that?
Is that not, though, Ian, partly the writer again having fun with the fact that it's Christie? Because within all her books, I can't remember how many books she wrote. I know it was probably around 100. And as I understand it, she played with certain ideas in those books, whereby trick magicians and trick photography and mirrors and all that kind of. Isn't that what they were doing?
No, because again, right? Doctor Who scripts needs to have an internal logic, right? If people in real life sees a huge flying wasp, huge in your room, you're not going to turn around and say you didn't believe it was there. Do you know what I mean? You're going to turn around and have
what we know about Christie, though, as a woman.
No, even if you're a writer. No,
listen to me. As somebody who created those stories, means that she had that in her head, in her imagination, she was minded to believe that potentially human beings could make all sorts of things appear real when they're not. I think that's what they were trying to play to here.
No, it's just bad writing. If a big wasp came in front of you and you saw it and you heard it, whatever, and it threw things at you, you would believe it's there. Why would you deny it? And as I said, that is the problem with the screenplay.
She does.
I completely hear where you're coming from, Ian. I totally do, and I do tend to agree with you. But for one thing that just popped into my head when you were saying that, do you know when people see things like UFOs in the sky, without getting into the yay or the nay on that, you can see something that kind of really shocks you to the point where you can see it and then walk away and within a few minutes go, no, I couldn't possibly have seen that. And then your brain actually starts manufacturing reasons or what that could have been and starts making suggestions about practical things that could have been, because your logical mind takes over and says,
I've heard that said to me several times by people who claim to have seen things.
No, you haven't got me. Look, UFOs are different. If you see it millions of miles and you see a UFO and stuff, that of course you're going to question it. But this thing right in front of you, I'm sorry, but there's going to be no excuse for that.
Step in and say this though, and back up Wendy and say that I know people who claim that they've seen UFOs really at quite close quarters, or things that are unexplainable at close quarters. So I think I do sort of.
As I said, Ian, I think straws. I know. Well, as I said, I get where you're coming from, because they would be so close to this thing, and it would be very obviously in front of them. But I still think that the human brain goes into like shock.
Excuses for this screenplay. Go for it. You go for it. And then the big stinger goes through the door. The big stinger goes through the door, and she still doesn't believe it. Come on.
That I will give you. I will give you that moment. Yes, I will give you that moment. I was thinking, that's pretty obviously
It's real. You can touch
Yeah.
it.
I will give you that moment, yeah.
Although the writer of this story, Gareth Roberts, is a massive Agatha Christie fan, and so is Russell T Davies. Apparently, the idea came from the producer Phil Collinson when they were allocating who was going to write what. And gradually, I think it morphed from a more traditional detective whodunit story into this comedy monster of the week kind of tale.
Again, I have to keep reiterating, right? I enjoyed this episode, right? But
we know you
for
do.
me as a fan, I want Doctor Who to be good, and I want Doctor Who to have an internal logic, which it seems to have a problem with for some unknown reason. And the screenplays, majority, in my opinion, have never been as good as some of the American stuff that's out there as TV shows. But as I said, just my opinion. But I will reiterate, I did enjoy this episode, but I did go like that a couple of times. But
I think it heaves a little. I think it does begin to heave a little, Charlotte, when you're aware that Roberts and Davies, with each successive draft that was going between the two of them, they were challenging one another to include as many book titles from Agatha Christie's novels as they possibly could. You notice that? Well, I certainly do. My mother used to read so many of these when I was a kid, so I recognised a lot of them. It does kind of break the spell a little, maybe, if you're so minded. How does this sit for you?
I think, for me, I understand what Ian says, but I think there's a line, and because this episode is so self-aware at points, that it knows it's got Agatha Christie, it knows it's playing with Cluedo, it knows all the tropes, that I give it a bit more slack because it's self-aware in that sense.
Because it's Doctor Who. That's why you're giving it slack.
No.
If it was another show, you'd be like, why?
No. Okay. Here's a comparison. Aliens of London, I think because that is trying to do serious in some bits, and because it's not really winking at a genre or a trope, the silly bits don't work in Aliens of London. Whereas in this episode, because it's set in this time period, it's set with the Doctor and Donna, like Dan was saying, having multiple comments about Agatha Christie, Cluedo, Professor Peach in the lounge with the lead piping. It's self-aware.
That's
so
funny.
Because it's self-aware, it's not. It knows it's silly, I think is what I'm trying to say. Like, it knows it's silly, so it's playing into that. Whereas some of other
you can be silly,
stuff,
but using logic, though. You can be silly, but I'm just saying that anyway, I've said it before, so I won't repeat it. But I hear what you're saying, Charlotte. I hear what you're saying.
I wonder if, because the series, they knew they had, I mean, the series was a massive, massive hit by then, wasn't it? It was everywhere. I think, or wonder, did they feel more comfortable making a story that didn't necessarily follow, it wasn't going to be perfectly logical storyline wise, and coupled with the fact that they were obviously one-upping each other with the scripts and things like that to get as much in. Did they feel they could get away with an episode like this because they'd already established that the show was, a massive hit, and it had some good quality episodes? Did they sort of say, oh, let's just have some fun with this one? And
I think so, Wendy, and I think that shows itself in a couple of places. To a lesser extent, the conversation between Donna and Agatha Christie, where Donna talks about the guy that she was engaged to, who turned out to be the servant of a giant spider. But more particularly in that moment that you talked about, Ian, where Donna says, "Oh, come on, Agatha Christie and a murder mystery. It's about as likely as Charles Dickens surrounded by ghosts
that's
at
funny.
Christmas."
That
is the biggest. That's both eyes. That's not just a wink. That's both eyes sort of blinking and winking at the same time. It's so self-aware. It's ridiculous. It just sort of reaches out the screen, and yet I feel it never really breaks the spell for me.
Just like that episode that you mentioned just now, he accepted the Doctor, and he accepted everything that was happening around him at the ending. But they could have just went with that she accepted that was a huge wasp and whatever, and was trying to cope with and stuff, because she was going to lose her memory anyway. Do you know what I mean? So why play into this thing where she was like, I don't accept what's going on? Why play into that? That's what I'm saying. That was what's wrong with the writing. That little bit that was wrong with the writing. But as I said, they could have gone that way, but they didn't. They went a stupid way. That's just me. As I said, it's just my opinion. But anyway, stop.
David Tennant's Doctor is a mixture of, it's kind of Hercule Poirot on acid, I suppose. And the beauty of having a character like the Doctor with his amazing physicality is that if you want, when you've got a smaller cast, somebody's going to get hit with a blunt object, somebody's going to fall off a high precipice.
Nobody questioned him though when he got poisoned.
Well, this is the point. Somebody was always going to get poisoned in this story, and the fact that he's the Doctor and he's the one person within the cast that can power through it, that can overcome it in probably the standout scene from the entire episode. I think even the stuff with the Wasp. I think when I look back to the Unicorn and the Wasp, all the years in between, because I hadn't seen this for well over 10 years, the scene that I remember was that scene where the Doctor gets poisoned, because up until that moment he's powering through, he's on a roll. As you say, David Tennant is right on the edge of overdoing it, and in that scene it's him and they really go for it. But before we get too deep into that moment, let's head over and see what the people who are watching and listening along to us over on YouTube and Facebook, let's see what they've got to say and what memories we are stirring up that are buzzing around in their heads. Let's check it out. Okay, thank you to everybody who's joined in with our conversation and who are adding their comments and their memories as our conversation goes along. We've got the Darren Zone who says, hello, topping day, what? Hello, Darren, good to see you. Carol Jude says, hello to all. Good to see you. And Sam says, hello, everyone. So there's lots of people saying hello as they listen to us talk here and asking one another whether they've seen this episode recently, because that's the thing with these stories. I hadn't seen this in well over 10 years, Charlotte. How about you?
Oh, God, I think I watched it when it was going to be part of the watch-alongs. And I think I just watched it because I remembered. So, I like that episode. So that would be last year.
Over on Twitter. That was nearly 2 years ago, believe it or not.
Yeah. 2 years, but before that, I hadn't watched it in years. So
Peter Harrington, we've got a comment.
Same thought though, that I liked it before I watched it again.
We've got a comment here from Peter Harrington who says, "Isn't the Wasp from a story about a dead wasp on a plane mystery? I'm sure I've seen that in a Poirot." I think it probably is. I think most of the little strings were borrowed from Christie's own work. Talking about that between themselves too. I'm with Dan, says Daniel Leach. I don't know which part of my comments. always good to know.
It's good to be with Dan.
American here, totally agree, says Carol Jude. Wendy, I think that was down to your comment there.
Perhaps,
about Americans' love of British period drama. Is that what it was?
Yep. Or possibly, yeah. It certainly seems so.
Philip King adds, I think this could be for you, Ian. What about Warehouse 13? That's American and silly.
Yeah,
silly isn't always a bad thing. I've always said about that when people say Doctor Who is very cheesy. That's not a bad thing when it's done right.
Yeah, but Warehouse 13 had an internal logic. It didn't go as far as being as silly as Doctor Who. And I have loads of friends that actually abandoned Doctor Who when especially this episode. I remember Keith saying, "I'm not watching that. How stupid is that?" Do you know what I mean? And there's a lot of people that abandon it because of the writing. But as I said, Warehouse 13, I think I watched 3 seasons and I got fed up with it, but it did have its internal logic, and that's the point I'm trying to make. But anyway, whatever.
Numerous people agree with what we said about the great casting in this episode, Charlotte. It's a nice lean cast of reliable people, isn't it?
Yeah, and Russell's era had a very good track record with ensemble, having a sort of small but tight-knit cast and giving them all traits and giving enough that you remembered them.
It's all in one place, isn't it? Like the house and outside in the garden and stuff like that. So very contained episode, this one.
Yeah. Peter Harrington asks, is Fenella Woolgar Jack Woolgar's daughter? So that's an actor who appeared in The Web of Fear. I have absolutely no idea, Peter. So if anybody else does know, please get in touch. Let's know, type40.podbean.com or on Instagram and Twitter at type40.2 or in the comments section on YouTube. We'd love to know. And yeah, it's the guy from Jago and Lightfoot, as many people have commented. Darren Zone says, great cast for this story includes Felicity Kendall, Felicity Jones, a few years before Rogue One, and Christopher Benjamin. So yes, people chipping in there with all of that. Even his tongue acts. I think that's Carol Jude. He's mentioning David Tennant there. Yeah, he does. He really does. What else is here? Hello, all from Vanessa Law. Sorry, I'm late. Good to see you, Vanessa. There's always somebody late to a garden party anyway.
Hello, Vanessa. Nice to see you.
And yes, it is set in the 1920s, 1926 to be precise. Peter Harrington reminds us of John Pertwee's other gig after Doctor Who, Whodunit, which is a game show that he made for ITV. Apparently some episodes are up on YouTube for people to see, and I've never seen it. Do you remember that show?
I remember it. Remember it very well. I remember that he was used to had a detective called Mr. Brown. I think that Detective Brown, whatever his name is, and he always used to try and solve it. But it was very hard to actually follow the clues in that show. But I really liked that show. But I remember
we've got a Christie expert in the house. Carol Jude says 66 detective novels by Agatha Christie and 14 short story collections.
She was a writing devil.
I knew there was a lot. Yeah, not quite as many as I thought, but not far off. And Carol also says that I think I remember rolling my eyes when I first saw the Wasp. That might be my only concrete memory from the first run. Of 2 to 4.
A lot of people did. A lot of people abandoned Doctor Who. A lot of my friends abandoned it. They just said it was just too silly. But yeah. Well.
And the scene that is the scene where that is discussed is so chilling in retrospect. Vanessa Law says Agatha Christie herself did not always provide the necessary clues to get to the answers. So as a writer, she cheated a little herself. I think that's something that mystery writers all do to some degree. Ian, do you spot that?
In
the mechanics of sort of murder mystery stories generally?
Yeah. Jessica, what's that one? Jessica, what's her name? What was that show called? Murder She Hopes. Yeah, that one. Yeah.
Murder She Hopes. Vanessa Law asks, I do know what Ian means. Russell T Davies does write and add a lot of silly stuff. I think he felt that particularly with episodes like this, he decided which were going to be the funny ones. And in this instance, he worked closely with the writer and very much encouraged him to make it funnier and funnier and funnier. And looking back, certainly when I was watching them with my family in particular, we did appreciate if they got the running order right, Charlotte. A scary one, followed by a funny one, followed by maybe a more standard adventure one. It's all part of rolling out the perfect Doctor Who menu. I think that each series was more than the sum of its parts. I know that's a cliche, but I really think it's true when it comes to new Doctor Who.
Yeah, I think new Doctor Who, because obviously they didn't have the 6-part structure from Classic or the 4-part, so they had to do it Monster of the Week, and that's what they chose. So I think having that in mind, they knew that they had to almost cover multiple genres because they had less time to do it. So that's why it did come across at times almost, I got that feeling watching that. This is the funny one. This is the historical one. This is the serious one, because of the setup of just how they were writing it at the time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thanks to everybody who is listening and watching along. We appreciate all of these comments, all of this feedback. It's good to judge how I'm sort of processing all this after such a period of time, alongside your memories too. Please keep them coming, and we'll be connecting a little bit later on in the show again with all of you. So Graham Harper directed this story. Graham Harper, the veteran Doctor Who director from the classic series. He directed Caves of Androzani and Revelation of the Daleks. Russell T Davies brought him back on board for Series 2. I think he directed the block that included the Cybermen episode as well as the finale, and he would return after this as well to do, certainly did The Waters of Mars. This is unlike anything else I feel that he ever directed, particularly in the classic show, but even in new Doctor Who too. It's very imaginative, I feel, Ian, energetic, and surprising in places too. We get the expected Dutch shots in this. We get the Batman style shots. Moments like we're looking at on screen now, where we're looking down a normal hallway. The Doctor calls down that everybody should stay in their rooms or whatever it is, and we see that everybody
show yourself. He says,
"Yeah, show yourselves." That's
show
it.
yourself. Yeah.
Everybody's sort of there. Split second timing, beautifully framed, and nobody breaks character. It's all I just thought this was one of several brilliant moments of flourishes within a story that could have quite easily have been that kind of three-walled set mystery story that we saw growing up on BBC or ITV in shows like the Forsyth Saga or those original Christie adaptations that ITV used to do.
I don't know.
It brings it to life, though. I don't think that moments like this, it's borderline farce. I know it is, but it never becomes pantomime. And that is probably such an easy thing to do, particularly when you bring in a giant wasp.
Yeah, a big giant wasp that nobody believed was real for some reason. I don't know why. There you go.
I shouldn't have brought it up.
There you go.
I should have brought it up. But yeah, that was one of several moments in the story for me that just... Because with a murder mystery, as I said before, you know the etiquette of it. You know what you're going to get. And usually the order in which you're going to get it. But there's moments like that. And when we see this, the doctor pointing directly at the camera as he moves from potential suspect to potential suspect, we work our way around the room, and we end up right back where we started, don't we? We do a 360.
I like Donna kept going, well, was he with the murder? No, he wasn't. It's like, was he in murder? No.
Because those are the conversations we have at home watching murder mysteries, aren't they, Wendy? With our family when we watch Miss Marple or whatever?
Absolutely. And it does have that feel to it. It does have that sort of just, everybody sort of shouting out something, saying, oh, it's that one. Oh, it's that one. And I love Donna in this in particular, because she does sort of become, well, the companion is always on, on most levels, the eyes of the audience, and she's great, sort of calling things out in the background. And the scenes where Tennant says to her, he sends her upstairs and he says, oh, you're ever so plucky. And she sort of glares at him, I love those two together so much. That's why I have a real soft spot for this one, because although it's not perfect, it's a romp. It's just some fun, and it plays as just fun and something that, again, like a whole family could sit down and watch. But I can understand why it would be off-putting for people who are, already making a little bit of an allowance, if, from the very start of the new series. This would probably just send them off, and I totally get that. But this was.
There were some that were still struggling, Wendy. I think that even though the series has been off for a long time, there were some, a smaller fraction of the longer-standing audience who were still struggling with the rhythm and the energy of new Doctor Who. The 45-minute
my friend said. My friend, I remember watching this the first time, and my friend said, how stupid is this story? And I was like, well, it's meant to be a farce. And he said, the Doctor spits out this stuff that comes right out of his mouth, and the next scene is them having dinner. And nobody questions how this came out of his mouth. And I was like, yeah, you know what? You're absolutely right. And as I'm saying, these are the things that kind of, But as I said,
they would have been ganging up on him, saying, you're the oddball. It was you,
They would have been like, what?
Obviously, this is stretching it a lot, but they do comment on the
stretching
episode.
it 10 miles. 10 miles. That's what it was stretching.
This is why I think there is themes that sort of almost don't make that a bit more acceptable, but it sort of explains it a tiny bit. And it talks about this Englishness in the episode of you don't show any emotion. You keep everything
that only
under
happens
wraps.
in Carry On films.
Well,
that only happens in Carry On films. Come on. You got to understand the logic behind this.
No, but it's talking about a mindset. What they're talking about is the British mindset of Carry On. That's what they talk about.
They do mention that several times in the script down there. We're British.
Yeah, what an excuse. That's a stupid excuse.
It's true,
in real life. If that happens, we'll be questioning it. Why are we having lunch with this person, this alien person? They will know that there's something wrong with him after seeing that scene.
It's obviously several stops along the way from the same point of logic. But I'm not old enough to have known anybody from this generation. But my grandparents were of the generation that came afterwards, and they were still very much of that sort of keep calm and carry on. The ration book.
Also, did anybody find it a bit odd that the Asian woman Indian woman was in charge of the staff?
Well, she was a maid,
No.
so she obviously
But she was
promoted up.
Indian. She was Indian, though, wasn't she? So, I mean,
Wasn't she a
was
friend
that
of...
allowed? Because there was a lot of racism in those days, and there was
She
that
was
was that a
she
thing
was the
in
one
those
that was
days? I don't know.
with the I can't think
Yeah,
of the character's name.
She come back from
She
India.
come
She
back
was
with
with her
her.
in India, so perhaps she was,
Maybe.
you know,
in service.
I think maybe that's how they tried to explain that.
Yeah, and if you think about it, she didn't have a husband at that time, so it would have just been her running the house, the lady. It wouldn't have been a male in charge of the house. It would have been her. So she probably would have had the power to say, no, I'm having her as my head of staff.
That's not, no, I mean, anyway, it doesn't matter because history is history and BBC doesn't really apply to history in their shows for some reason.
I think in this instance, though, I think historically too.
It doesn't matter. It's just fantasy, I guess. Doesn't it?
Obviously,
doesn't really matter.
She's from India. And I think she is a friend that has come back with Felicity Kendall's character when she come back pregnant, maybe partly to look after her because she's maybe around the same age, actually, slightly older. So maybe she was looking after her. But I think what we've also got to remember too is this is the 1920s. This is 25 years before the partition of India and over 3 decades before a large scale immigration into the UK. So people came and went across the empire pretty much individually. And so whilst I won't say there was no racism then, I would imagine that there was. There wasn't the kind of prejudice and sense of threat of the other, of immigrants that there probably would be several decades later, because she's just one woman. And
I think you're wrong. I think
I don't know. I genuinely don't know.
Well, I think the staff would be very upset that someone of a different color would be telling them what to do, and I think that's. But then, as I said, then again, the BBC doesn't really, they want to correct history for some reason. But as I said, that was a bit odd to me. But it doesn't matter. It's just Doctor Who.
The nature of service was a bit wider, and depending on a family too, where they had their money, and maybe if they'd fought in various wars, for anywhere between from the Crimean War upwards, really from the mid part of the 1800s and up. Britain and India were very closely linked as regards trade and travel and things like that.
Yeah, but I'm saying,
honestly don't know.
Even when my mum came over in the 60s, all the English people used to look at my mum and dad when they were sitting on a chair on the bus. So and that was the 60s, because you imagine if it was the 20s and someone came from India and was telling, quote, white folk, commanding white folk what to do. It wouldn't have worked. But as I said, it's Doctor Who's and it's Doctor Who. So And
well, I think you're making a good point here, and I think actually what you're saying as well is what we're now seeing on steroids.
Yeah, definitely.
Basically.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that to me was I don't want to get into a conversation, but I was just saying that was a bit odd.
Yeah.
For me. But anyway, whatever. Yeah.
I know I didn't give much thought to it, but then again, there's something else I want to talk about, because there's a classic series story which is kind of similar to this, which I'll mention a little later on. But I just wanted to go back to the scene between the Doctor and Donna, where they're thrashing around the kitchen trying to expel the poison from the Doctor's body. That is the scene. That is probably the ultimate Marmite scene, certainly of the Tennant era. I think I was always a bit middling on Donna at the time. I've really warmed to her over the years. But there's a big dividing line in Doctor Who fans between people who just cannot stand that scene, because both of them, Tate and Tennant, I'd love to know how many times that was rehearsed, Charlotte, how long it took them to film it, because it's that energetic and so fast. Harvey Warbanger? How's Harvey Warbanger? One word. It flows totally like conversation does, really, really heightened. And obviously the Doctor is trying to save his own life. Donna doesn't really know what's going on. It's exciting and it's funny at the same time. I don't know how they did it. I'm kind of in awe of it now. I think back in 2008, I was more in the camp of people who thought it was a bit much. But now I'm completely on board and I really, really loved it. Funny, isn't it? What can happen over time?
Yeah, it's true. It's like Nadell. I didn't really think much of Nadell when I first saw him. And then I started watching the Peter episodes again. And I thought Nadell and the Doctor really made a really good dynamic, you know, a comedic couple.
Yeah.
I thought, you know, but as I said, the first time I saw him, I couldn't stand him. Same thing with Donna. First time I saw her, I was like, oh no, they're bringing her back. Why? Do you know what I mean? And then I think it was this season where I warmed to her, that she was her very own person. Even though she was irritating at times, you can tell that she was a woman that had intelligence, but also, you know, a woman that could
intelligent. She's funny. She's
funny. Yeah, exactly.
Empathic. She's loyal.
Yeah.
I don't think there are better Donna episodes than this, but I don't think she was any better than she is in this. And they get the balance between them absolutely right in selling us on the fact that this is the Doctor's best mate. Yeah. And for all that DT is, it takes it up to 11. Somehow she manages to keep up with that, and so every scene between them is full of energy. And it's really connected, and you feel like this time in Doctor Who's history is lightning in a bottle. And it reassures me when I see not just moments like this, but the entire piece. After nearly 5 years of really slim pickings on the current show, this show was just as good, was just as dynamite as I remember it being.
I love these two together because it's not about sexual tension. It's just two excellent actors who work really well together, who just they're just, like you said, they're best mates. They bounce off of each other perfectly. Tennant and Tate are, I think, the best double act I've seen in ages. And they're just mates. So the whole scene where she kisses him to give him a shock would actually be a shock. It would be like your best mate turning around and giving you one on the lips, and you'd be like, what? And I think that's why, I mean, the scene didn't like bother me at the time. But a part of me was like, oh God, I hope they're not going to take this in that direction, because that was the whole fun of Donna. There was no romance, there was none of that, and there was a lot of funny lines about that. You know, where he first invites her into the TARDIS, and she's like, you're a thing, you know, and she's making this big show of, you know, not being the least bit attracted to him in that way. So
she made it clear.
She certainly did. And I think it was great. It was great to see a doctor companion dynamic, especially by then, that wasn't going to be all about romantic tension.
Yeah, and I think as well, they were playing with the fact that Catherine Tate was a real difference as a companion, just as an actress. Because before that, you had these very young, these very pretty, sort of romance.
What are you saying, Charlotte? What are you saying?
I can say it. No, but that was the sort of
Catherine,
stereotype.
just ignore what she said. Just ignore what she said.
No, but that's my point. She was actually a breath of fresh air, because she wasn't this stereotype almost that Russell had created of what a companion was in the modern era.
She's a real woman. She
completely broke that.
I don't know. I think there were a lot of companions that quote wasn't good looking. I didn't think Bonnie Langford was good looking personally.
But I didn't say, I'm saying Russell.
Oh,
Russell had created that template that the companion was female, was young, and was sort of a romantic
he didn't create
interest.
that. It was in classic as well.
But it was associated very heavily then with his era. So Donna was this lovely breath of fresh air, and also Donna's Catherine Tate's background as a comedy actress. We hadn't had a comedy actress in New Who be the companion. So the fact that we'd had, and I only think honestly, this scene was almost written perfectly for Catherine and Tennant, because I can't see Rose doing this. I can't see Martha doing this with the Doctor. This sort of kinetic and the quick one-liners and the pure comedy thing of, like you said, Harvey Wallbanger, like how's that one, and all those lines. Donna
was a little bit older, so had a little bit more worldliness, a little bit more of awareness of a lot of these the comments and the tropes and things like that. And yet, what I love about Donna is that she is very real. She seems a very real woman. She's somebody that, you know, I related to tremendously. She is beautiful, but in her own way, and she's very She is.
Very beautiful in her own way.
She is.
What does that mean?
I know what Wendy means. She's attractive, but she's distinctive looking.
You're being
Catherine
mean
Tate.
tonight, Ian.
She's a very attractive woman, but she's not so conventionally good looking.
I guess what I'm trying to say is when I think from a female's point of view, and as we get older, we see beauty in a very different way, and Catherine is so perfect to me in that role because she's in any situation that she's in, you know, if he puts her in a dress from the 1920s or whatever, she transforms into this, you know, this beautiful woman. And if she's in no matter where she is, really, she's very sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? She's kind of like an every woman, you know, she can relate to a lot of different scenarios, and she becomes almost the big sisterly sort of figure to a lot of the characters and a lot of the stories, particularly the Pompeii story.
Yeah. From what I remember, I haven't watched these in sequence for a very long time. From what I remember, the character, although she never transforms. It's a gentle evolution. She's never unrecognizable. She doesn't go through some miraculous sort of epiphany. She's always Donna, but she does evolve. She does grow.
Yeah, she becomes less abrasive, doesn't she? And from the beginning, she was abrasive, and even in, I think, the first few episodes when she was with David Tennant, she was very, very abrasive. But as I said, in this season, I think she was calmed down a bit and knew what the Doctor was all about. So yeah, I mean, you're right. She does grow. You know, there's no way she doesn't grow at all.
I think if I've got a bone to pick with this, it's the fact that it's as a whodunit story, which I do like. I don't read them, but I do like watching them. And it's hardly foreign territory to Doctor Who, but somehow the whodunit story in this doesn't seem to have much room to breathe, and therefore it never really engrosses me in the way that it could. I'll be honest, I couldn't remember who the unicorn was, so the revelation that it was Felicity Jones did actually sort of take me by surprise. It was oh yeah, I remember this. And it was more sort of the dawning realization. Oh yeah. But yeah, I'd like to have been pulled in a little bit more by it. And I think that the reason that I wasn't was probably the insistence that it have some sort of monster of the week element, that big... I mean, you could say it's as ropey as you know what.
No, it was okay.
Wasp, but
it was all right.
You know, it's there partly to sort of accelerate things, entertain children. That was the decision that they made to have a kind of monster of the week. And I can sort of live with it. But I think that was at the cost of a more engrossing detective story, and you know, particularly all these years on, I'm more than happy to live with it. And I think it does. I wouldn't call this a middling story. I do think it's better than that, but it does. It's, as I say, it's a working part of series 4. It fulfills a function to almost that we can sort of breathe a little easier in between what had gone before, which I think was the Planet of the Ood, which was quite heavy, and then what was to come after Silence of the Library, that double part was again very, very heavy. One.
Perhaps an intentional sort of, like you say, a lightness.
I think so.
A bit of, yeah.
And that could have been why they went to Gareth Roberts there. We're going to check back in with our friends watching along on YouTube and Facebook for some more comments in a couple of minutes. But before we get there, it's time to retire to the veranda just for a couple of minutes for a cheeky top-up, while you listen to a couple of minutes worth of the latest gossip from our friends across the Fandom Podcast Network. There you'll find a parallel universe full of great geeky conversation. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in a jiffy.
Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. We'd like to continue to feed your ears by inviting you to listen to these other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. It starts with our flagship show, Culture Clash, discussing the latest in entertainment pop culture. Bloody Kings, Immortals Take Notice, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theaters, where we celebrate our favorite movies. Time Warp, the Fandom Flashback podcast discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie and TV pop culture topics. Good Evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Union Federation, our Star Trek and Orville show. Hair Metal, the 80s and early 90s rock metal podcast. Type 40, our show covering the time-traveling Doctor Who universe with host Dan Hadley. Lethal Mullet, an 80s and 90s action film podcast with host Adam P. O'Brien. Also check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast with hosts Scott, Derek, and Nathan. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast, a deep dive into the final frontier with host Mark Newbold and Adam P. O'Brien. And check out our newest shows, The Fandom Show, our monthly Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube exclusive show about the month's hottest topics in fandom, and the FPN True Believers MCU podcast, discussing the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the related Marvel television and streaming MCU universe, including the connections to the original Marvel comics. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on several platforms. Please subscribe to the Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel to receive notifications of new podcast episodes and live events. You can enjoy all of the Fandom Podcast Network audio podcasts on our master feed at fpnet.podbean.com. The Fandom Podcast Network is on all major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast and iTunes. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. You can also find the Fandom Podcast Network on Instagram at Fandom Podcast Network and on Twitter at FanPod Network. Thank you for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
We've teased and tantalized you there, and we can even clothe you too. There's merch to match all of those shows, including Type 40. If you head over to the tpublic.com shop, search for the Fandom Podcast Network, and you'll find a store full of all the team colors for all of those podcasts, on anything from t-shirts to phone cases, tapestries, and all manner of other everyday items. Treat yourself, treat your other selves, and it all goes to support the Fandom Podcast Network into the bargain. So everybody wins. Yeah, back to the Unicorn and the Wasp here with Ian, Charlotte, and Wendy. Where did we leave off? Back in the 1920s. Yeah, we're going to deliver our verdict on this story in a couple of minutes. But yeah, let's check in with a few of the fantastic facts. Did you guys know that there was originally a different beginning and an ending filmed to this story, where an aged Agatha Christie, whose memory has started to return of this whole escapade, was starting to fill in the blanks, and the Doctor and Donna again visit her and show her that book cover. Apparently, it's on the DVD box set. I haven't seen this in a long, long time. I
don't remember that.
Nor do I.
I don't personally remember that now.
They showed the book at the end, doesn't he? He opens the thing and he shows this book.
Yeah.
Or something. That.
Yeah.
Is that book meant to be from the future?
Yes, because the date on it is like.
Well, it'd be on
Kindle.
Would it not be on Kindle or something? Why would it be a book?
But when the Doctor goes through his chest and finds the book out, it does say facsimile edition. The idea being that maybe there would still be, because we have facsimile comics now, don't we? Of comics from the 1960s and of some books at the Folio Society. They thrive on all that kind of thing. So I think the idea is that they would still be crunching those things out, and there would still be willing purchasers thousands of years on. We
still have vinyl. We still have vinyl. People can buy those,
still do.
And they're
We
not
still do.
like
Yes.
modern thing to use. So I think that's a good idea. That certain things I think will always stick around, but in smaller, more, like Dan said, very concentrated ways.
Yeah.
Doctor Who still going to stick around in the future, I reckon.
Of course it will.
So.
Agatha Christie will so conduct it. There was a scene in this that really confused me watching it this time. It was this moment where the Doctor is seen striding through a forest with a bow and arrow and some sort of machete cutting down foliage. I thought, what the devil's that? And I thought, is it some sort of throwback to an adventure that I can't quite remember? But it turns out it's a tie-in to a short story that appeared on the BBC website called The Lonely Computer by the writer Rupert Late. It's still up on the BBC website, and there'll be a link to that in the show notes of the podcast and the description of the video. I don't think I've ever read this of any of
that's
you.
news to me, no.
Well, no,
Nope.
but it made me think of Blink, because he's got
Yeah.
like arrows
Yes.
on his
Oh,
den,
yeah.
hasn't he? That's
Yeah.
what made me think when I watched it again.
Yep.
Maybe it's tired.
Cool.
Maybe it's tired. There could be a whole sort of set of them. Yeah, it could be a whole set of those. For all I know, the expansion of the BBC's Red Button service and the website, and in time the YouTube channel, meant that they did experiment quite a lot, and probably more with Doctor Who than any other show. But it meant that it was quite difficult to keep track of absolutely everything, particularly in the Moffat era. There's like 2 or 3 minutes. I'm still finding 2 or 3 minutes worth, Charlotte, of Matt Smith performances that I've never seen before. The guy left the part 8 years ago.
Well, Moffat liked his minisodes.
Yeah,
But
lovely.
I remember back then, because I watched the show, but I didn't do a lot of the extra stuff as I see it now. So I never watched the minisodes. So I'm the same. There's a lot of chunk that I haven't seen.
There was somebody in the cast of this. If you keep your eyes peeled, you can see them in the background. The serving staff. You will see there's a man called Alexander MacDonald, Sandy MacDonald, who was David Tennant's father. He was visiting Tennant on location for this episode, and they offered him a role there on the spot. So if you know what he looks like and be able to sort of find him amidst all the cast there, the background, the supporting artists, that's what they call them, isn't it? So it's nice. I know that Sandy MacDonald passed away a few years ago now, so it must be nice for David that he had that moment.
Where
with
did they
his
shoot
father.
this, Dan? Where did they shoot it?
I don't know. Some stately home somewhere, as always.
Darren mentioned earlier
From
that
Wales.
he thought it might have been Llanfairpwllgwyngyllgogerychwch, I think, in Wales. So
Right.
when you said Wales, it could very well be that.
Yeah.
I'm
Location.
going to say
Have to
it would
look
have
it
been
up.
within a certain radius of their main studio. I think that they had locations they often went back to time and time again. And big
Llanfair or
properties
something.
like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Be interesting to find out. We'll try and get all of that information and put that in the description too. But yeah, I just think this is a lovely thing to have done because at the time, as I say, David Tennant was the most famous guy on TV, and I think his father was a priest or a cleric or something like that. And so yeah, it would have been a world away from his life in the church to being on probably the biggest show on TV at the time. The script is riddled with those references to Agatha Christie and all those book titles. And as I said, there was a competition between Gareth Roberts and Russell T Davies to get in as many as they could. I was able to spot some. Turns out the list is as long as your arm. I'm going to put those in the description to the video and the show notes of the podcast too, and you can see how many you got. Create a little bingo card if you like. Now, we do have the ratings, Ian, the ratings for this episode. What do you think the ratings, the final figure would have been for this back in 2008? Would you like to take a guess?
I don't know. Maybe 7 million. Probably 8. Oh, no, actually, that's too much, isn't it? In those days, there were maybe 5. I reckon 5 to 6. Yeah.
Sure. So where are you going? 5 or 6?
5, 6, or 7. That's what I reckon.
Charlotte, what do you think? Where do you think the ratings came in at this one?
So you saying like after a week?
Yeah, the
talking
consolidated
rating.
figure. We
Oh,
didn't
the
really have
consolidated
the
figure.
breakdowns.
Yeah, that's what I'm
We didn't really
thinking.
have breakdowns then the way they do now. The way they gather ratings and divide them has changed quite a lot in the last 14.
Yeah, if it's not on the night and they were looking a bit ahead, I'm going to say, because it's for Series 4, like I said, Doctor Who was at its height for Series 4. Russell was like King of the World and David was. I'm going to say 7 million.
7 what? Billion?
Million.
Million. Oh, right. We said billion. I'm like, what? Okay. Million.
Any guesses, Wendy? Where would you go?
I would have said on the high end of 7 million, something like that.
Believe it or not.
Because I could see this being quite a popular one somehow.
Go on then. Tell us, Dan.
Believe it or not, the figure for this was 8.4 million views.
Wow. That's
Wow.
crazy.
Said Series 4, folks. That's how big the show was.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
More to the point,
That's
the
it.
audience appreciation index figure was
Yeah.
88.
Wow.
88, which is counts as excellent in that particular figure there. They hadn't been calculating AI figures for that long at this point in the way that they are now. But yeah, that's a high figure, and they were consistently high at this time in the show's history. We have, so I suppose we have the one question left to ask, the simplest question of all. How many pieces of lead piping out of 5 would you give the Unicorn and the Wasp, Charlotte?
Oh, this is hard, because I understand that it is a bit, if you think about it too much, your logic sort of goes, what? But like I said, this is farce. It knows it's sort of in on the joke. So I give it a bit more sort of leeway there. I think the performances are all so good. I think the writing's very quick. I like the fact that the script doesn't hang around a lot. I think it works for this sort of story. But like I said, it's I can understand there is some logic cues that you just go, ugh. So I'm going to say 3.5.
How about you, Wendy?
I got a lot of enjoyment out of this episode, and as Charlotte and Ian have said, there's definite issues, with the logic of the storyline in places, but I would tend to sort of err on the side of giving it a slightly higher review, because it's just a great, fun story, and it really lifts you out of the moment that you happen to be in at the time when you're watching it. So it's a kind of an episode that you can put on, and it's just fun and quite light-hearted and quite uplifting to watch in that regard, and fun. So I would give it 4 out of 5 on the basis that it will always be one of the episodes that I could easily go back to and watch again and again and still enjoy.
How about you, Ian? Where would you place this? We've got 3.5 from Charlotte, a 4 from Wendy.
Don't know.
I love it. I'm going to have to get an Ian soundboard where we can have your. Go on, carry on, mate.
I think it's a very enjoyable episode, barring the logic and stuff like that. And as I said, Doctor Who's internal logic is up and down. It doesn't make any sense. But barring that, it's a very enjoyable episode, and I enjoyed it immensely. I didn't think the CGI wasn't too bad either. I think it was much better than when they first started with Chris Eccleston than with the CGI in
I agree. I think this stands up a lot
better.
Than I was expecting.
It's much better.
I watched this in standard definition, so I was expecting it to be really quite fuzzy. I was surprised, pleasant surprise.
Yeah, they did well. I'd give it maybe I'm being generous here, maybe a 3.5 or something like that. I'd give it that, basically. I was going to give it a 2, but
have we talked you around?
Not really. but it's Doctor Who, and I like Tennant, even though he guns a lot. That's fine. I'll give it 3.5, just to be generous. But there you go.
I've been mulling this over for a couple of days since I watched it, and I enjoyed this just fine at the time. In context, as I said, midway through the 4th series, at the height of the series' popularity. And I've never used the word filler when it comes to Doctor Who, particularly Russell T Davies' Doctor Who. This is the prime example of an episode that certainly I, and maybe you, could quite easily take for granted. I think predictability and silliness is part of the agreement. It's in the disclaimer. The cast are all in on the joke, and so are we. It's indulgent and perhaps not for everybody, but I found it buzzing with spirits, audacity, whimsy, everything you'd expect from Russell T Davies and Gareth Roberts. It's the simplest of pleasures in many respects, and like any parlor game, it's impossible to not play along with it. I think it's almost irresistible. I was going to go with 3 out of 5, but I'm going to give it a 4 after all. I can't think of many ways in which, to its particular remit, this episode could have been better. I think, like I say, I wish the detective story, the whodunit, could have been given that little bit more time. And I think that's something that would dog new Doctor Who right up until the Capaldi era, when each episode was given an extra 4 or 5 minutes, and that they dropped down from 13 to 12, didn't they? And they allocated that the screen time amongst the remaining episodes. This, I don't think this is quite as bad as some of the Smith episodes would be. It doesn't get resolved in a rush. In fact, far from it. Like I say, it's the world's slowest car chase.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm quite confident in given the fact that I'm still smiling thinking about it, and giving this a 4 out of 5, I feel completely justified. And yet again, I'm tempted to go and watch. I won't say read, I'm not a reader, but certainly go and watch more Agatha Christie adaptations. Maybe get the old Poirot on the go, or the new Poirot, because there's a brand new film about to be released in the UK, certainly, and probably all over the world. A new version of Death on the Nile.
No, thank you.
That moustache is ridiculous. Okay. I'm sorry.
A new version.
Yeah.
A new adaptation of Death on the Nile is in cinemas at the moment. It's the second one that stars Kenneth Branagh. The success of these films, whether you like them or not, I haven't seen them myself, whether you like them or not, is probably testimony to the storytelling of Agatha Christie. She's been dead. Yes, she died in the late 70s, I think. Lived to a ripe old age. Certainly lived to a point where she could see her books enduring and being adapted.
Who stacks books like that?
Something
Come on.
Somebody prepping for a photo shoot.
I was going to say, somebody with to know there's a camera in front of you.
It's not quite the tragedy that of a Charles Dickens, whereby he was, at the time of his death, the man was crushed with insecurity and a sense of not having achieved. Christie lived beyond that, and I think that's quite a nice thing.
Yeah.
We've got looking at the history of Doctor Who. Yeah, we mentioned them earlier on. Gareth Roberts and Graham Harper, the writer and director of this. Graham Harper would return to the show and direct The Waters of Mars. Gareth Roberts, this was his second of 6 scripts. So he would return for the Planet of the Dead special, and then would recur right the way through to the Peter Capaldi era. A man who had written several Doctor Who novels in the 90s, sort of worked his way up with the audio range too, worked on shows like Emmerdale, all that kind of thing. Graham Harper would go on to work with Phil Collinson. Again, he directed the infamous tram crash episodes of Coronation Street in 2010, which I think it's still the most ambitious thing they've ever done on that show, where they dropped a tram through the roof of the Rover's Return or something. Ian, do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that.
I still watched it at that point, yeah.
Yeah, my sisters were into all that stuff, so yeah, I remember them telling me, and I saw the episode because they used to rerun it, didn't they? They used to rerun it on a Sunday, as I recall. Yeah, they used to play it. I think it come out on a Thursday or something like that, and then they used to show the reruns on the Sunday, I think, or at some moment in time, as I recall. But yeah, I saw it. It's good. It was a good special effects. It was. It worked. Well, I mean, Emmerdale tried to top it, didn't they? With a plane crashing into Emmerdale, didn't they? And a literal plane crash into the town, killing like I think 20 cast members that had been there for years. So Coronation Street did the tube thing, didn't they? And I think all the soaps were trying to top each other, weren't they, at that moment in time? So yeah.
Yeah, to get more and more ridiculous. Kill off as many of the regulars. This thing, didn't they, where a new producer would come in that case it was Phil Collinson, and it would be, everybody would check their contracts, who they're going to kill off. And how long have I got left to run on this? Okay, just time, I think, for one more check-in with all the people who are watching and listening along on YouTube and Facebook for their comments and memories of the Unicorn and the Wasp. Daniel Leach is here, and he says, I don't mind it being silly. Doctor Who should be fun, and so long as it's fun, all good with me. There we are. Can't really say much fairer than that, can we? That's told you.
Can't argue with that. Yeah, can't argue with that. If that's the way people see Doctor Who, it's fine with me.
Vanessa Law says, I don't see why anyone who made it through Aliens of London can't make it through this.
Aliens is not good for the sort of, like I said, it's trying to tell a serious story almost with the Slovene, and no.
Yeah, it was terrible. Absolutely terrible.
Carol Jude adds, I think Donna is at an age stage in life thing. She is absolutely my top companion, and I think that scene is what begat Much Ado About Nothing. Okay,
Yes.
So Catherine Tate and David Tennant did go on to star in Much Ado About Nothing together,
Absolutely.
didn't they? Shortly after they both wrapped on the show, and they continue to work together regularly. I think that they, even if it's just a podcast that they're on or doing radio shows together, they're very
They
much
did.
still in one another's lives.
Yeah.
She's got a movie coming out, hasn't she? Nan, the movie.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yep.
Carol also says that Rose was sweet, but really, come on, it's Donna. They're not equals. Probably not. They're probably not.
I did like Rose.
Pete Harrington says each episode in series 4 is a comedy. Then
No.
Donna is very practical, says Vanessa. She packed her own things before getting in the TARDIS. Yeah, she was well prepared, wasn't she? She knew what she was signing up for. I quite like that.
Her and Bradley Walsh, who had the sandwiches. Do you remember that? He brought his own sandwiches. That was hilarious.
Yeah, that was a good moment.
Yeah.
Series 4 is my favourite Russell T Davies series, and Donna is a big part of that. Adds Vanessa again.
Yeah.
Demopin, watching on YouTube, says such a good point. The episode felt written specifically for her and for the 10 Doctor dynamic. I've got another comment here from Vanessa. Your remarks there about Catherine Tate's specific look. She's not the classical definition of pretty. David Tennant is pretty enough for the both of them.
I didn't do it. They did. I didn't say nothing. It was those. It was them.
We
love
you, Catherine. We do. Yeah. Oh, Peter Harrington says, I watch Hollyoaks for a laugh. It's so bad. Yeah, I did see that Graham Harper has also gone on to direct some episodes of Hollyoaks too. He's done something on virtually all of the soaps, which is surprising. He's done quite a lot of comedy, but a dark black comedy. I think he worked on The New Statesman that starred Rick Mail, but that was very, very dark compared to like the average sitcom, for example. And Kelly adds that I watched a documentary about Agatha Christie recently. She had a rather interesting life. I think she's overdue a biopic, everybody. I'd certainly love to see that. And it could be that Doctor Who, too, is overdue a trip back to the 1920s. But if you did enjoy this and want something that's of a similar flavour, it brought to mind to me the 1982 classic, 40 years ago.
Holy
40
crap.
years since the Peter Davison story, Black Orchid, that nifty little two-parter full of Harlequins and Charlestons, and they're all freezing cold but pretending it's the middle of summer, that kind of thing. Just a wonderful story that I can see no wrong in, but then again, it's a Peter Davison story, so it's always the same with me. I see lots of similarities between that and this. You know, we've got the hidden biological child and all that kind of thing, but there's no alien elements to Black Orchid, so it's often referred to as the last purely historical story. But yeah, I could quite happily go and watch Black Orchid now after all of that for sort of more of the same. Thank you to everybody who's been watching and listening along to this. Leave us some more comments by all means, and get in touch through our social media with anything you want to ask, any comments, anything you think that we've got completely wrong or indeed right. We'd like to know. Get in touch wherever and however you like. Okay, yeah, so The Unicorn and the Wasp. You'll be pleased to know, if you haven't seen it for a while and this has stirred your interest, it's available as part of the DVD and Blu-ray Series 4 sets. It's currently streaming on the BBC iPlayer if you're in the UK, or over on HBO Max in North America. Check your own streaming services, please, in other territories, because I have no idea about what's going on where. This is also on Sky, isn't it, Ian?
It is. You can watch it on Sky. Definitely.
So I've got
What do you want to say?
Various box sets. Well, I don't use Sky, but you do. So
it's all New Who on Sky. Definitely, it's just New Who. It hasn't got classic Who.
To watch. Yeah. That wraps it up. That's the old girl starting up and calling time on another edition of Type 48 Doctor Who podcast. I'll be back. It is indeed. I'll be back with another one soon. Look out for that wherever you found this. It could have been on the dedicated home feed for Type 40 at type40.podbean.com, or maybe we rolled up on the podcatcher of your choice. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Podbay, all those other places or on the Podbean app itself. That's so easy to use. Even I can get the hang of that. We're also on YouTube. Of course, we are here on the Spacebook YouTube channel, and we're still on the fabulous Fandom Podcast Network's own master feed, which is loaded up with all of those treats for your ears practically daily. So please consider a trip over to there. Maybe you'd like to have your say on all of this. Get in touch. Reach out to us at our social media, Instagram and Twitter at Type40Doctor-Who, or you can email us type40doctorwho@gmail.com. And if you're feeling really, really brave and fancy some real-time, extra-dimensional chit-chat, head over to the Type 40 Facebook group. There you'll find fans of all ages and from all over the Whoniverse geeking out about the past, the present, and the future of all things Doctor Who, about what's to come, including that. It's still in the news. Could David Tennant be coming back? We're still not too sure about that one, Ian. The question is not going away, is it?
He's not, and I don't think he's coming back. So why would he? You know what I mean?
Ian, if people want to hear and see more of you, where can they reach out to you on social media?
And sorry, you could what is it? Twitter. You can read me on Twitter. My name's Ian David Diaz at the Mega Geek. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on. Well, you can't find me. You can find my stuff that I've actually made on YouTube. The Rebecca Gold channel. Just type in Rebecca Gold and you'll find it. It has my movies on there. It has the series Rebecca Gold on there too. So knock yourselves out.
Which is fantastic, by the way.
There you go. See.
I have seen it. I can speak.
The women that didn't like Catherine Tate really likes my show. Really likes my show. So there you go.
And how about you, Wendy? Where can people reach out to you on social media?
Well, I am on Twitter at Wendology1. I have a Facebook page called Wendology, where I sort of share up little tidbits and things that I find online and share up some links to various streams that I like. And on Saturday evenings, I am on PJ Maybe's Let's Talk Geeky stream. Well, tomorrow.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Yes, cool. I can't wait for that.
I'll be there.
Thank you, Ian. You just reminded me. I'll be there. On Wednesdays, we do a movie review stream with PJ, Wednesday evenings in the UK. And tomorrow we are doing my absolute favorite movie of all time, Jaws. The original, definitely. The only.
The Spielberg masterpiece. The Spielberg masterpiece. Yeah,
yes. Definitely. And we're also, I'm doing on Sundays, Mr. Hyde and I are co-hosting a B-movie horror cinema show where we watch back a lot of the old sort of funny black and white B-movie horror films of like the 1950s and things like that. And we're having a really good time with those. They're great fun. So that's worth checking out as well if you like that.
Charlotte, how about you? Where can people hear and see more of you?
Well, I'm not really on social media except from Facebook, so you'll see me in the Type 40 Facebook group. I sometimes are part of the chats or threads or all that. And then you can hear me on the Type 40 live stream with Ian and Dan and some of our other lovely family as I think about it. Yeah. And also, I'm sort of co-host and sort of do a lot of streams with Daniel Leach. And we sort of do a big variety. Currently, we're doing Line of Duty. And then we recently had actually a Doctor Who stream where we had the TARDIS Zone on, where we just spoke about what we like about Doctor Who and like what the rumours are and a lot of what we think could happen and had a bit of fun with Doctor Who. So that's our latest stream.
I was there. Yeah.
Daniel Leach channel on YouTube. Good. Get over there. Don't miss that.
Yeah, subscribe to Daniel's channel. He's brilliant, that guy. So yeah, subscribe to him.
Definitely.
Find me on Twitter and Instagram as the Spacebook, where I'm geeking out about all things inside and outside of the TARDIS. Well, it falls to me now to reach out through time and space and to grab hold of the randomizer, because we need to find out what we'll be reviewing here on the next thrilling adventure in space and time.
Oh, please be another
Type
silly one
40.
for Ian so he can have a mental breakdown.
Have a mental breakdown. Just point out the obvious. That's what I normally
Okay,
do.
so last time on a Type 40 extra video, which you can find on the Spacebook YouTube channel, Ian and myself, we connected up the randomizer and we thrilled as it spat out that first title. We're going to pick the next one live here with you guys on YouTube and Facebook. And if you're listening on the podcast, you'll be hearing our stone cold reactions as we go over now to the randomizer, everybody. Let's see whether it's going to be kind or not. Are you ready? Are you ready?
Go on in.
Okay, so the next Doctor Who story that we're going to be watching here on the Type 40 Doctor Who podcast is... We need a drum roll for this bit, don't we? Definitely need a drum roll. Are you ready, Ian?
Yeah, go for
Wendy.
it.
You ready, Charlotte?
Yeah.
Choose a story. Choose a story.
I want a Matt one.
And the very next episode that we'll be reviewing here on Type 40 is In the Forest of the Night. We always have the time if you have the space here at Type 40.
Peter episode.
Take care. Speak soon. Bye-bye.